Hi, I'm Dr. Scott Laborowit, and this is a case I call RIP to tear, where I manage a posterior capsular tear. I'm going about my day, and it seemed like a regular case. The posterior capsule at this point is still intact. I'm using irrigation and aspiration to remove the distal cortex. You can see from the capsulotomy that this is a femtosecond laser cataract surgery. There's a 5mm capsulotomy performed by the laser that's nicely centered. This will become useful later when I need to capture the optic in the IOL. Just to pause for a moment as we zoom in, we can see an inherent piece of cortex, but there's no evidence of posterior capsular tear as I zoom in. Now using a 90-degree INA tip for subincisional removal, I'm pulling. The first piece seems uneventful. As I pull this next piece, it's after removal of this that I notice the tear in the posterior capsule. At first I'm usually in denial for a moment, but you can see something's going on just distal to the remaining cortex. Since the chamber's formed and I'm still able to grab cortex, I continued. Here's a freeze frame just kind of helping you see where the small rip in the posterior capsule is. It's about 1.5 millimeters by 1 millimeter. So as I mentioned, I continue to remove the cortical material subincisional. I wanted to keep the anterior chamber formed, so I placed viscoelastic in the anterior chamber prior to removing the irrigation and aspiration. If the chamber were to collapse without the viscoelastic, then that could cause a break in the posterior capsule. So here I'm carefully placing viscoelastic. Clearly this ProVisc is not carefully enough placed, because you'll see that small rip just turned into a huge entire posterior capsular tear. So this is where you take a timeout and pause. I'm going to show this in slow motion. I'm not sure why, but it's 90% slower, and you can see that small tear turned into a rip really in the blink of an eye. So then I placed a 3-piece IOL in the sulcus. Fortunately, no vitreous was forward at this point. Placing the 3-piece can be tricky, so I focus on the distal haptic, rotating the injector far to the right, and once the lens is halfway in the eye, I start to back the injector out so I'm not squishing this optic in the distal sulcus. It also allows the lens to unfold. Too much manipulation can cause vitreous to come forward at this point as well. The proximal haptic is then placed inside the eye using a Sinskey hook. And the goal is just to get it just under the iris. At this point, with a 6mm optic and a 5mm capsulotomy, I was able to easily place the optic in the capsular bag. That'll help with future centration, stabilization. It'll also help keep any vitreous from sneaking up around the sealed IOL to the anterior capsule. During the removal of the viscoelastic, I'm not going to attempt to remove any viscoelastic from under the lens because I want to keep the vitreous in the back of the eye. I will use Diamox in the post-op period since there's not an allergy concern. Before removing the irrigation and aspiration, I'll put myostat inside the eye and turn off the irrigation while I'm manually keeping the anterior chamber inflated. Again, to avoid any trampolining and potential vitreous coming forward. The use of the myostat will bring the iris down, and if it's over the eye well edge, I feel more comfortable that it'd be more challenging for vitreous to come forward. When I hydrate the wound, if I have any concern of leakage, I'll be more likely to place a stitch, because again, you want the chamber to stay solid and deep so the vitreous doesn't have any opportunity to come forward. I often wait and stall so the pupil can come down enough over the edge of the IOL before I leave. So I just wanted to share with you, what seemed to be a routine case and how to manage and get through it. Have a nice day.